Your feedback is important. Many of you in the past have asked that we have a speaker from the apartment management side, and that's why Jeff is here today. Jeff Passadore is the owner and founder of Cambridge Real Estate Services, a Portland-based real estate management company. Cambridge business activities include both property management and asset management oversight of more than 110 rental communities in the 9 western states. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Passadore.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to speak. I'm going to do my best to not let my Christmas cold affect the presentation. As Greg mentioned, I've been invited to give an overview from the perspective of a property manager and what the recent past is like, what's shaped our recent past, and perhaps give an indication of where we're going. In order to add a little credibility to what I'm going to say, I'll mention that I've managed apartment buildings in Portland and other markets for 24 years, along with the staff that I now work with at Cambridge Real Estate. Our corporate office is based here in Portland. We are exclusively a fee manager. We're as good as any particular client thinks on any particular day. And so far, so good. Covered payroll again this month, so that's a good story. Our footprint includes management of properties in 4 western states: Oregon, Washington, California, and Idaho. We are also contracted to provide asset management services for people who own properties in states where we do not have a book of business that would allow us to be efficient. Our database that we've used in order to gather information for this presentation and what we use to shape our opinions is based on about 10,000 apartments, either under property management or under asset management. I thought it might be interesting to begin the presentation with the realities of some less than stellar economic conditions. So this is what will cause everyone to wonder whether lunch is going to sit well. We're struggling with a bit of an unemployment issue. We know that here in Oregon, and we have lots of company really across the country. This is the national unemployment rate. If we were to draw Oregon's line, it's regrettably higher than this line. And obviously, we see the trends that we've all heard about over the last many months and in fact, few years. That's not great news, so let's go on to find out what our homes are worth. One indication of the real estate values, again, lunch was okay. Right now, it's kind of sort of making noise, but we'll be okay. Anytime that red line dips below the 0, headaches follow for lenders, for investors, for all kinds of folks. You see a little bit of a rebound. I'm not sure what neighborhood that was. I don't think it was mine. At least that's not what I'm hearing from Zillow. But, you know, we're maybe starting to work our way back to smaller losses. That's, you know, not a bad trend. Here's one that should be a negative, but I'm going to show you how I can spin things. This is actually a positive. We're not building single-family homes like we used to. And if you're a would-be new home buyer, you're going to have a limited number of options to choose from. If, on the other hand, you're an owner-operator, owner-manager of an apartment building, one of the bigger competitors over the last 10 or 15 years, the allure of buying your own home, has fewer serious alternatives. And I think it's this slide that is actually a bit of a silver lining for those of us in the rental apartment industry. The lack of new home construction, be it for sale or rental homes, is actually creating a limited amount of supply, and we think that's turned itself into a real advantage for people that are intelligently operating their rental communities. So let's talk about finding some better news. I'm going to spend time today talking about 4 key benchmarks or areas of opportunity. These opportunities include the financial performance of a multifamily asset, the operational standards that might lead to value enhancements, physical condition of the property and the role that plays and what the value of the asset may in fact be, And then when the time comes, for probably everyone in the room, preparing for a time to exit out of one asset and exchange into another, or simply take the winnings off the table and enjoy those benefits. We're going to see a number of graphs today. I'll give you a bit of a piece of background. As I mentioned, our firm's involved in the asset management or property management of about 10,000 rental units. We used an awful lot of data from our database and checked it against the Metro Multifamily Housing Association database to make sure we were going to give good broad market data. And so the graphs that you'll see will be based on that information. The first graph shows really what's happening to rental income received. And if this surprises anyone, perhaps for good reason, we see lots of information in the national media about rental income plummeting. There are cities, Las Vegas, the Southwest, East Coast, Florida, where rental rates have dropped dramatically. Concessions are the order of the day, and rental income collected just simply is not holding up to where it's been. This is the reality of the Portland metropolitan area. This is the reality that says, yes, we've had our hiccup, and our hiccup is a remarkably small hiccup. Our hiccup has flattened out income between 2008 and 2010, but frankly, our theory is that we'll take that all day long. If this is the way the recession is affecting rental rates in Portland, Oregon, I'll sign up for more. And though it's flattened out within the last couple of years, I think there's reason for optimism that we're going to head in the right direction, in the northeast direction, in the next several months to the next few years. Vacancy loss is our enemy. Empty apartments generate no rent, just like empty seats on an airline generate no revenue for that airline. In the 2009 calendar year, we saw vacancy rates move up considerably from 2008, and that created considerable alarm. People did not know where we're going. As the 2010 calendar year comes to a conclusion, we've concluded that the correction was about a 12 to 15-month correction. Our vacancy rates are back down to less than 5%. Some would say that in certain submarkets of Portland, they're down below 4%. This is the opportunity that we waited for, and we didn't have to wait that long. The opportunity to raise rents for our firm started a year ago. We started raising rents predictably on every lease renewal a year ago, and we continued that throughout this past year. The vacancy loss problem that we can isolate now as a 2009 phenomenon, we believe, is something that we can put behind us and know that limited new supply and still a pretty desirable quality of life means that we're going to see more people seeking to find a place to live, be it for sale or rental. In addition to rental income, we rely on other forms of income, obviously. You could have vending income, you can have different sorts of fee income. This gives you kind of a macro view of what that form of income has done over the course of the last several years. It's nearly doubled from something in the range of 4% to certainly by now pushing about 8.5% to 9% of the average apartment's rent. This is the type of income that astute management and operation doesn't leave on the table. One of that particular forms of income consists of late fees. Late fees can be lucrative. We hope to collect fewer and fewer of them. Credit loss is a concern in our industry. And in fact, remarkably, over the last 5 years, the percentage of residents paying rent late has actually gone down in our experience. We'll talk in a minute about what might have influenced that. But this is a very legitimate form of income, showing that 5% of the residents that rent from us or in properties that we're involved with are paying rent late. That's down from probably 8% 5 years ago. Security deposits, where landlords are savvy enough to collect them, represent another great buffer against operating expenses and another source of ancillary income. In this particular slide, we're showing that relative to 5 years ago, we've tripled the level of income we're generating from simply holding security deposits at the end of a residency for breaches of the lease. It's real income. It makes a difference. It also establishes a standard that says we just want a level playing field with our customers, and we want to be left in good shape when they leave so that we're ready for the next customer that comes along. I think by now probably everyone in the room has heard about the trend towards recovering utility costs. This has been common in the market for more than a decade. We've put together just a quick snapshot of what that means. Utility costs are increasing rapidly, and we'll get to that here in a few slides. But in the meantime, we're trying to keep pace with that by increasing not only the participation rate, but what the chargeback represents on a monthly basis. By having a hedge against the fastest growing operating expense that this industry sees, we protect ourselves against an eroded NOI that really can be attributable to utility rate increases. So miscellaneous income, rental income, managing vacancy loss, being savvy in terms of collecting security deposits and utility charges gives us a pretty rosy picture over the last 7 years. Our income tracked pretty closely as an industry in Portland with the Consumer Price Index until we hit a really good spurt mid-decade. That lasted for probably 3 full years, and you can see the gap we created between Consumer Price Index-based measures of inflation and what our revenue was. What I think is remarkable is that as we look at 2008 through 2010, we've preserved that spread between what inflation may have done to prices of commodities and, in fact, what our revenue has managed to hold on to. Okay, income is half the story. We've also got to be effective in covering our operating expenses and making sure that they're not eating into the bottom line. I don't think there's any representatives here of one of the formerly traditional means of advertising apartments, so I can be fairly bold and say that we have changed the way we market as an industry. With apologies to the Oregonian, I still read it in paper form. I don't know that there are a lot of reasons for us to be big advertisers there. This is really a slide that we call the impact of the internet. And frankly, finding customers more cost effectively is essential to any business, and ours is no different. Our advertising costs are a quarter of what they were 5 years ago. And I'm not sure where they're going. It appears in the last 3 years they've settled out. But remember, a couple years ago, we were looking at potentially one of the toughest markets that we could find ourselves heading into. And from an advertising cost standpoint, we didn't spend our way out of this one. We made our way out of it, and advertising ended up becoming a pretty predictable form of expense. Staff costs can have a tremendous impact. We as a company tend to take an approach that says this is not a great place to save money. We think that a motivated, competent, well-trained site staff is going to do an excellent job. But I thought it might be interesting for those of you that are not hands-on in the day-to-day operation. We surveyed about a dozen of our more experienced managers. We asked them what they spend their day doing. And what we learned is about 25% of their time is spent looking for the next customer, marketing their property and positioning their property for future stability and success. They spend just over half of their time taking care of the existing customer, handling purchasing decisions, collecting rent, running the business operation, and dealing with day-to-day resident issues. These are the people that run our businesses. These are the backbone of the company that we run. And these people are spending their time taking care of customers. It's a customer service job. Of course, all businesses have a little overhead. The oversight of other staffs and other function represents kind of our overhead commitment. When a property is staffed right, when the staff is properly motivated and trained, this cost becomes a benefit to us in making sure we're deriving good value. Talked earlier about the ability to buffer our revenue stream and our NOI against rising utility costs. Utility costs are truly the one cost, water and sewer in particular, that we are having a difficult time as an industry controlling. So the city of Portland and surrounding suburban areas have recognized how expensive it is to treat wastewater. Sewer costs are just going nuts on us. 20% increases in some submarkets. It's an area of concern for us, and frankly, it's an area where only through very careful management are we really going to be able to exert any kind of control. There are conservation efforts that might make a difference, resident education, chargeback programs, but this is our nemesis as I see it over the near term, is controlling utility costs and trying to make sure that they don't erode the fundamental integrity of our financial footing. Water and sewer rates are moving up. PGE took it easy on us this year. There's an announced 4% increase. We should all be happy, I suppose. Pacific Power is going to see 14% increases effective this past weekend. It's going to be tough to do for properties that haven't explored energy conservation measures. This eats right into the bottom line. There's a stack showing the 3 most common utility costs. Water costs are identified as blue. They're relatively stable. Local water and sewer providers have chosen to make most of their cost increases on the water treatment side, on the sewer side. You'll see the orange bar tends to be moving up more rapidly. Trash disposal fees, which were a huge concern 10 or 15 years ago, have really flattened out. Rate increases are more modest. I think people have figured out that recycling and reusing tends to cut the garbage bill pretty effectively. We're still paying attention to it, but it's that sewer monster that's lurking. A quick slide to show that one of the things that we try to do is make sure we control the repair and maintenance side of our properties by making sure as often as we can that skilled employees are providing repair services. There's no profit motive. There's no overhead cost associated with a third-party vendor. We routinely service more than 80% of work orders and turnover requirements by just using in-house staff to get that job done. There are people here from the insurance industry. I think Greg predicted costs were going down. That's terrific. He and I agree. I'm not sure what they were thinking for the last several years, but it seems to be coming back into balance. The insurance industry is more closely tracking with what we think is more of an objective consumer price index-based thing as we hit 2010 and possibly beyond. Taxes are no one's favorite, but honestly, they also are tracking pretty consistently with where we think broader costs are. If it's even possible that someone has a mid-80s mortgage still around, that's the peak of this graph. More relevant is probably the last 5 years circled in black. You can see that, in fact, the biggest cost of owning investment real estate typically being the interest on debt. These are great debt rates, and for our clients that have managed that particular expense, we tend to feel pretty good about keeping that cost in line. Okay, so we've run through some financial things, income and expenses, and controlling debt costs. We're going to breeze through 3 last topics. In terms of overall operations of a property, we try to stabilize revenue as much as we can, keep the control of turnover activity, and keep the leverage on the property manager's side of the table. We do that by trying to manage when leases expire. We try to manage the number of month-to-month leases. And where the opportunities present themselves, we try to keep leases staggered so that we don't have tremendous exposure during times of year when we know the market is slow. This is a graph that shows really a perfect bell curve. Some will say that it should look differently. We feel pretty good renting apartments midsummer. We'd rather not be in that business during the holiday season. We are denying more applicants than ever. We are strict in how we screen. We don't rely on credit scores exclusively. We look at background, we look at experience, we look at job stability, we look at criminal conduct. We are now denying almost 1 out of every 5 people that applies. If your gut is telling you to accept more than 4 out of 5 people, I want to be involved with your property. It's attracting better people than we must be, because in fact, about 1 out of every 5 we just don't think is going to be a great customer, and we can't afford the risk associated with someone that's going to add instability to our resident population. I think I put this in at the request of one of our site people. They just had to get some PR points. 5 years ago, we'd move you in with 10 pieces of paper, we'd shake your hand, and we'd hand you a key. Today, we hand you a key, we shake your hand, and we have you sign your name on 30 different pieces of paper. That's part of that time we spend making sure the customer understands the expectation and making sure as best we can that we're really influencing how we're managing the property. If the grocery store has no produce, they're out of business. If the apartment building has vacant apartments that can't be moved into, you might as well put the closed sign up. We are rigorous in our preaching to staff about getting a vacant apartment move-in ready. And we really do get it done in a week, and we really do it according to this schedule, and it really can happen. In my prior life, I remember meeting the owner of one of Portland's highest profile properties at the time, and he spent about 10 minutes trying to convince me that they don't even hire the painter until the apartment's rented. That people don't really need to see the apartment they're going to move into, they just need to meet his staff. Well, we kind of sort of threw that one out the window. So we get the inventory ready. We want to make sure that when you sit down at the desk, you're going to see where you're going to live. We spend a lot of money on maintenance. A couple of things that we think are important are to understand that after we get that vacant unit inventory taken care of and make sure it's ready and ready quickly, that we've got a maintenance program that's designed to retain residents so that they don't move out frustrated that we weren't taking care of the property. We want to be in your apartment every 10 weeks, and if we're not, we know it, and we will figure out why we're not in your apartment every 10 weeks. We're going to be in your apartment when you don't invite us, just on our own twice a year, just for the tune-up and oil change to make sure things are in good shape. We do not want you moving out because something's broken and it's easier to move across town to get it fixed. In terms of the physical condition of the property, we all talk about something obscure called curb appeal. We explain this to our managers in very simple terms. We don't care how great the inside of the apartment looks. If someone drives up to the property and gets the wrong read, their car doesn't get turned off. They just simply pull back out of the driveway and they're down the street looking at the competitor. So in terms of curb appeal, the building condition has got to be right. We've got to put forth our best foot. It's got to send a message that's consistent with our expectations for a resident who's going to be approved, and that's at least as strong as what they're going to see on the inside of the property. You can't apologize. You don't get a second chance. You don't get to explain why the outside of the property is a little rough, but we're going to work on that next year. We all have this in our budget, right? This is a snapshot that's woefully inadequate of that nemesis that we all have in our pro forma, some sort of reserve for replacement. I love the fact the brokers and the lenders are still allowing us to use numbers that keep properties flowing the right direction. But here's one quick read of why $400 really doesn't go as far as it used to. Just walks you through basic interior components, a paint job, and parking lot ceiling. We didn't throw in the roof. We didn't throw in the playground. We didn't throw in all of the other things that do happen. But we get to $400, and if we're doing this right, we're managing the property in such a way that this money is not elusive. It's available to us, and it's there to make sure the property stays at the right condition. In terms of the ongoing repair and maintenance, that's easy stuff, day to day. This is what I need done today. People moved out. This is what we need to do in the next week to get the apartment ready. There's some long-term planning things that we hope most of our clients embrace as being essential. We got to figure out the timing for certain improvements. One very large owner-operator of multifamily properties in the Portland area, I noticed started a paint job right after Thanksgiving on a 400-unit property on the east side of town. They're halfway through, and it's now mid-January, and I really don't see them finishing that for the next couple of months. We take a look at when things should be done and take into account fussy little details like, will the weather cooperate while we finish our job? In terms of these periodic reinvestments, I'll show you a photo in a second as we wrap up. If you're going to spend the money, make a difference. We will talk to clients a lot about the time it's time to paint the property. And oftentimes what we hear is, well, let's just paint the property the same color. That's great. If you want an architectural award, let's paint it the same color. Otherwise, we're going to spend some money. Are we going to get the most value out of it? Is it time to modernize? Is it time to enhance? Is it time to kind of sort of send a message that you're doing more than just kind of sort of repeating past steps? Speaking of photos, we're winding to a conclusion. I threw this photo in because I think it speaks to a certain amount of precision in how things are kept. This is a clean and tidy property. It's 10 years old. We don't let the landscape get overgrown. The decks and patios aren't cluttered with stuff. That sidewalk gets pressure washed twice a year. It's neat and it's clean and it sends the right message. This is a property where when it came time to paint, it may not be all of our taste, but we modernized a bit with a paint job that was a bit unconventional, and it made a statement. It highlighted some of the natural architecture of an otherwise pretty ordinary building, and it kind of sort of brought the building into a different light. The time will come that we'll all decide that the piece of real estate that we own is a piece of real estate that we should own in our past. The advice we give clients as property managers is make sure you've set yourself up. Do you have good, solid financial operations that a buyer can rely on? Have you taken care of deferred maintenance so you're not going to get hit over the head with that discovery during due diligence? Have you operated the property in a way where the resident quality is strong, the site staff that's there reflects positively on the property? Do you have debt on the property that makes liquidation, sale, exchanging easy to have happen? These things are not things you decide the week before selling. These are things we like to keep in mind every single day we're operating the property. So, a few conclusions. It's not the best of economic times. Unemployment's high, and there are indeed some challenges that face us. And I don't think those are going away very quickly. But the underlying financials that we experienced during 2010 as a management company in this region probably couldn't have gotten much better. But we honestly believe they will improve again during 2011. Rents are increasing. Resident quality is still good. We think the underlying financial footing of the apartment buildings that we're watching will only strengthen. We believe strongly that preserving the value of the asset means preserving the physical condition of the property and making sure that you feed the property. Take care of the property, it will take care of you. And ultimately, when the time comes, optimize your investment by making sure that through the operation of your property in a prudent way, you've taken full advantage of the opportunities the market presents, and you've set yourself up to find a buyer who will continue to do the same. Thank you.